let's get some analysis then on the importance of this visit by Antony Blinken. We're now joined via Zoom by Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, a professor of international relations and director of the African Center for the Study of the United States. Prof, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I was watching this briefing, and I hope you had an opportunity to see while Minister Naledi Pandor was hosting the U.S. Secretary of State. It seemed that she was not mincing her words very much, particularly coming to the issue of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where, of course, we know that the U.S. does indeed and openly sides with Russia. The Minister, Naledi Pandor, saying we should also be worried about Palestine as we do, as we worry about Ukraine, and show that, the concern is equal. What do you make of that? The fact that she wasn't concerned about, basically saying we are not taking a position on this still as it stands.
You see, the purpose of this dialogue, strategic dialogue, is that the U.S. and South Africa are not just friends, but they're actually partners. And in that kind of respect, what you do is that when you meet, you dialogue, you argue, but you also disagree. And the issues that you mentioned, Palestine has been an irritant in U.S. in South Africa relations because the South Africans feel that the U.S. is very much pro-Israel when it comes to that issue. Yeah. So it's an old conflict. The new dimension of it is, of course, Ukraine or Russia. And I can see why South Africa would want to continue to toe the line of, no, we actually are not going to be pushed into any conflicts with other countries, because the U.S. should not, in fact, be dictating to South Africa who its friends should be. Yeah. Particularly if the U.S. is not seen to be as even-handed in conflicts such as Palestine. So those disagreements have been there, and I think they'll continue.
Yeah. Prof, it's interesting that you talk about the fact that, we are not just friends, but partners with the U.S. But the question will always be whether we'd get to a point of, being equal partners. It would be delusional for us to assume that South Africa is an equal partner. The fact that the Minister, Naledi Pandor, had to make the statement that, we are sovereign. And as a sovereign nation, it means that we decide for ourselves, who we are friends with, and the fact that we need to respect each other. I don't think that if there's an equal relationship that one has to make that clear. That should have been a given, but clearly it's not a given. So will we ever reach a point where there is that equality in this partnership that you mentioned?
I don't think perfect equality will ever be attained because, the U.S. has a long history. It has a huge economy. It has global responsibilities and a lot of allies. And South Africa is a big power in this part of the world. But I don't think that's the bigger issue about these countries becoming equals. I think it's managing the relationships of unequal partners. I think that's the best way to put it. Managing these relationships, but in a very mutual sense, in a very respectable manner. And I think that's why South Africa stands on the point about sovereignty. Yeah. We don't want really to be dictated by the U.S., even though we respect our strategic partnership. Yeah. But we want to disagree over some of these bigger issues that seem to be the priorities of the United States.
Well, Secretary of State Blinken's visit, as we're told, is set to restore relations with sub-Saharan Africa. What is being restored exactly? I see these points being made about, that relationships might have been strained, during the Trump era. But were they really that strained? We're still talking about this partnership and the trade links between the two countries. How much so were relationships actually strained during the Trump era?
I think the Trump era was just a blip in a larger framework of relationships that have really continued uninterrupted. So the bigger issue on Trump was the political mistrust between Africa and the U.S. and actually just the lack of interest on Africa on the part of Trump.
Yeah.
But I want to say that I agree with you entirely. A lot of the relationships have actually remained very consistent. I think the issues that are being discussed now on trade, there are issues that were still ongoing even under the Trump administration. The Trump administration withdrew from some international conventions that were important to Africa. But I think what we are seeing now is a return to a relationship that has remained pretty much constant. The US pays attention to some African issues. Africa pays attention to the US. And both, the continent and the US really have some interest to maintain across the board. So whether you're talking of trade, investment, and so on, these are relationships that are not going to change fundamentally.
All right, Prof. Khadiagala, thanks very much for speaking to us. We always appreciate your time. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
All right, that is the Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, Professor of International Relations and Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States, weighing in, of course, on that visit, of course, by the Secretary of State of the U.S., Antony Blinken, who, of course, just a short while ago had that briefing with Naledi Pandora, our minister, who was hosting him in Pretoria.